Hi, welcome back to True Crime Sages. Hello, True Crime Sages. I'm Tina Cummins, and we have Belinda Powers on the phone. Hi, Belinda.
Hi, Tina.
Like to know, we're going to wait for some viewers to get in here. We just started our live feed. This is the second time we've gone live, and we're trying it out. So tonight, Belinda and I will be taking questions and trying to give you answers on the Delphi homicides of Abby and Libby. From our perspective, as people who have worked search and rescue and worked on investigations before. Um, so, again, we're going to wait until some people are in chat. Right now, I'm not seeing anybody. So, if you're out there, say hello. Give us a little hello on the chat box. Um, yeah, so we've got one person watching. One person hit the like. Can you say hello in the chat? Hi out there. Hello. Welcome. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And yeah, Belinda and I have a lot to discuss. But again, we're going to wait for some more people to get in here. Um, yeah, I didn't announce that we were live. Similar aspect. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
So again, we're going to wait for some people to get in here, and then Belinda and I are going to be discussing Delphi homicide. Hello, Belinda. If you would like to ask us a question about the Delphi homicides, go ahead and ask us, and we'll give you our opinion. This is about opinions. We don't have the crime scene, you know. Anyway, so we've got one viewer right now, two viewers. We're going to have to wait until some more people come in. And let's hope this live stream goes well. If you're watching, give us a shout in the chat. Hello. Welcome. So while we're waiting for people to come in the chat, we're going to discuss a little bit about investigations and how it works. For those of you out there who don't already know this, I smoke like a chimney. I am a heavy smoker, and I have been my whole life. If that offends anybody, I apologize. Not my intention. So, Belinda, you ready to start?
I am.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Delphi homicides, going back to the very beginning, and how an investigation is handled, and some of the suspects or persons of interest. Can't say suspects, but persons of interest that we've discussed over the last 5 years. And the reason we want to do that is because there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people think that everything is a CSI or some sort of crime scene investigation on television, and that's not the way it works. So people have questioned us changing our opinions about certain persons of interest over the course of time, and that happens in investigation, and we're going to get into that. First, I want to preface everything by saying that all persons discussed in this podcast or live stream are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some of them have already been proven it. Some of them already have been proven guilty. This slow mode is on. I don't know how to turn it off. Yeah, we're new to this whole live stream thing, and it is what it is. We're trying, we're working on it, getting there. Takes a little time. Being a senior, I'm not too tech savvy. Belinda's a lot better at that than I am. I did study computer programming a long, long, long time ago, but things are so different now. Anyway, that was back in high school, and yeah, I'm way past those years.
Well, with technology these days, it's nothing like it used to be.
No, it's not. And we'll get into some of that in our discussion. How do you want to start this, Belinda?
Well, go ahead, hon. Just run with it.
Okay, so back when Libby and Abby first went missing, the public was notified immediately. They went knocking on doors. They knew within a few hours that the girls were missing. And the family spread out, and the police spread out, fire department, all these people were out on the trails looking for the girls in a matter of hours. And they stayed out there that night. Okay, so everybody was trying to find and locate these kids. And why is that important? Well, it's important because when you're looking at a crime scene, obviously the girls were found and we're where we are today, but when you're looking at a crime scene, you have a vast amount of space in the woods, and you have a lot of people that were out there. And so when homicides are committed, the first thing they do is isolate the crime scene, block it off with crime tape, and have everybody back off. Now, in a search and rescue or recovery mission, Belinda, can you give the public a little bit of an idea about how that's handled?
Well, I think immediately when law enforcement is called, they have to even know if there's even a missing person, if the girls just ran off, or what actually happened. So I think for the first half an hour, 45 minutes of gathering information from family to even put into context of what is going on here.
Right.
And then of course they start going around the area that anybody had, they start canvassing the area, find out if anybody saw anything, and go from there.
Right. And so now, in speaking in terms of an investigation, we're at the crime scene. What takes place with search and rescue recovery when you're trying to recover someone?
Well, immediately, the ones up in front, with this particular case, the gentleman had saw them from across the water, correct?
Uh-huh.
And so therefore they weren't
from his phone
right up on him, and that's a good thing, because that's where the contamination comes in, and
But the first, in all search and rescue or search and recovery missions, the first thing you do is you want to back everybody off.
Right. And that's what I was getting to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In this particular case, they didn't have to do that because they were across the water.
Right. But that said, it was, again, actually there was evidence that was collected on the bridge side of the creek, and then evidence collected on the other side of the creek, according to what we now know. And so, even though people were probably not in the immediate crime scene, except for those who actually found the girls, there may have been other people around, the evidence that was found on the bridge side of the crime scene. And so law enforcement has to process everything. Any hair found, there's, Lord only knows, cigarette butts, whatever's found out there from people looking and searching for these girls, drink bottles, or somebody dropped some trash, piece of, a gum wrapper. It could be anything. But anyway, so being that the crime scene went from the bridge all the way to the other side of the creek, that is a vast amount of space. And in investigations, the first thing you want to do is get everybody out of there and find out who was actually with the girls when they were located. And then you're going to want to rope off the crime scene or tape off the crime scene. Keep everybody out of there. That way they can, determine a lot and collect evidence.
The most important thing is back everybody out the same way they came in.
Exactly. And so when they're collecting evidence, they want to do it in the least amount of contamination as possible. Okay, in medicine, you are taught to do everything in certain patterns of behavior when you're working on a patient or collecting something so you don't contaminate that. And with the evidence teams that came in there, they had an enormous job to do, not only to extract the girls and take them to the hospital and go from there, but the scene itself, a lot of people are criticizing how law enforcement has handled the investigation in various ways. But starting off, when you have so many people out there, now not necessarily on the other side of the creek where they were found, it's a limited number of people, but starting from the bridge and you've got all these people out there searching, they have to eliminate a lot of people and a lot of things and determine whether or not items were actually in part of the investigation and part of the crime scene. Okay.
Yeah, and most often, is when you come upon that stuff, anybody that does search and rescue knows you mark it, you flag it, you tape it, you do whatever. Yes. You don't touch nothing.
You don't touch anything.
And a lot of times you get the ones that never did search and rescue or any of that, and they come out, and your first instinct is to pick it up.
I mean, yeah.
That's definitely a no-no because, you have to have gloves. You have to have, not us. We don't never collect no
right. You don't want to leave footprints. You don't want to leave anything. Obviously, since the girls weren't even missing 24 hours, they wanted to make sure. Now, we don't know if the girls were alive or not when they were found. However, someone in the search party obviously determined that, and then law enforcement, fire department, they went from there. So now, at this point, that day, we knew that the girls were found. They were located, and then sadly, they were both deceased. Now, going from there, you've got 2 children that were taken in the middle of the day, which is unusual. When children are taken, a lot of times it depends on the age of the child, and the age may or may not determine what someone's intent was. Now, with Abby and Libby, there was clearly a crime scene there. And so in looking at their age, we kind of determined that these were crimes that were sexual in nature because of the specific demographic. So a weekend, Belinda and I were both asked to read for the case, work on these cases, these girls work on this, and we weren't asked by the family, we were asked by someone else, and without being asked by the family, in the beginning we really didn't want to get involved, but we went ahead and did our psychic profiles, and what we believed, having experience in this type of thing, is that the person we were looking for at that time was a serial killer. And the reason we were able to come to that consensus viewpoint is because of the time of day it was. There were 2 girls at once, and the age of the girls 13 and 14. That was what we knew at the time, and then we didn't know anything else. We didn't even know their names at that point. So if you want to look in one of our former videos, we explain what our psychic viewpoints were. But frankly, that has very little to do with this investigation. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Belinda, you still with me?
I'm with you, Tina. I'm here. No. Go ahead and continue.
Okay, so moving on from the psychic stuff, a week later, we were given images of the killer, who they were saying at the time was a person of interest coming across the bridge. Now, for Belinda and I, that fit right into where we were at in our headspace. So I took those images and we started taking them apart, picking them apart. And one of the first things we noticed is the guy had what appeared to be a video camera under his hat. Now, we went back and forth looking at all these pictures, debating, does he have long hair? Does he have short hair? You know, is it this? Is it that? Is this? Is it that? But our consensus view again was, in coming across that bridge, A, he was prepared to kill. B, he was prepared to take two girls during the middle of the day. He was not afraid, telling us that this was a seasoned predator. Okay? Someone who had done something like this before. This wasn't his first time. So Belinda and I have, myself in particular, I've studied a lot of predatory behavior, paraphilias, serial killer type behavior, and so on and so forth. And in looking at the killer and the way he came across the bridge, he was prepared to do at that time what he wanted. And not long after that, they focused in on Daniel Nations. Now, we talked about this earlier, Belinda, but with Daniel Nations, let's give a little bit of background here. Okay, he's no longer a person of interest, so this is strictly, for just this discussion. But we focused in on Daniel Nations because of his personal background that was made public. Sadly, how his mother was tragically murdered, the crimes that he had committed as far as predatory behavior, and so on and so forth. So in the beginning, Daniel Nations, with his, his boss discussed him, and, the whole hatchet thing, and, the rage that he had. And so in discussing Daniel Nations, Belinda and I began to build our own, I guess you would say, profile, not just psychic profile, but okay, this is a person who, A, is controlling these girls, B, who has a rage issue, or C, because of the video camera, maybe into paraphilias and videotaping. And I had experienced that with, in other cases with like Jeffrey Willis. I worked on Rebecca Haringa's case, and he was into that type of behavior. So in discussing Daniel Nations, we thought, okay, so far he hits the profile. But every single case that we've ever worked, it's like a puzzle, okay? Now, puzzles don't work if all the pieces don't fit. And there's a determination of whether or not those pieces are going to fit. And it takes a while to get there. So initially, the first person that came to my mind wasn't Daniel Nations. It was actually Mark Redwine, and I'd worked on his son's case. But with Mark Redwine, I kept getting Delphi to Denver. Okay, this has got to be Mark. It's got to be someone. So in looking at the cases of Abby and Libby, it has to be someone with little to no conscience, and someone who is able to harm a stranger and brutalize a stranger and possibly videotape it. And the person the reason Mark Redwine came to my mind, not saying he did it, not saying he had anything to do with it, he's just a person of interest in the discussion. But the reason he came to my mind is because of what he did to his son. And even though he was just recently convicted from, when his son went missing, I was asked to work on his case. And so, I knew psychically, that it was his dad, and that this is what he'd done to him, because I'd seen it in my head. I know a lot of people think that's crazy and cuckoo, whatever. You can believe what you want. Doesn't matter to me. Factually speaking, that's why I was getting Mark. And so, in putting
Which
together
is connections as well, though.
Please.
Not just that.
Please.
I said not just that. He also had the connections to Delphi.
Yes.
That we didn't, driving back and forth. We also said.
Right. I said, Delphi to Denver, it's a truck driver. And so in my head, I'm thinking, this guy's driven a truck, and instantly it was like, okay, is he connected to Evansdale? Now, this is before I'd seen crime scene, exactly. I don't know where in the hell the, Monon High Bridge is. I actually went to Delphi and still didn't know where the bridge is. But in saying that, in my mind, I was going from Delphi to Denver. I kept getting that. And so Mark Redwine came up for me. And so in building this profile, I'm looking at the rage and the anger that's with Daniel Nations, and then the motive and capability and paraphilias that's with Mark Redwine. And then you see the guy coming across the bridge and he's got the camera on. Okay, so from there, the police investigated Daniel Nations and they set him aside. Still hadn't mentioned anything on Mark Redwine yet. So then, there comes some other persons of interest down the pike. Thomas Bruce, Charles Eldridge. The images that Charles Eldridge had on his computer, on his social media pages, were absolutely horrific. I don't know if a lot of people saw it, but, the hacksaw and the teeth and the blood, horrific. Okay, so again, we have another person that's capable. And then you have the killer, he goes in, Thomas Bruce, he goes into a church shop and does horrible things and then commits murder. And okay, so then we watched the police conferences. Belinda and I watched all of the police conferences. And back then, as psychics that were working on the case, and also search and rescue, and having worked on investigations before, we were looking at the videos, the vigils, everything, to see, does anyone stand out for us? And what stands out for us specifically? Is there anything you want to add to that, Belinda?
No.
Okay, so the police were talking about his gait, right? Talking about he may not be walking normally due to the separation in the ties on the bridge, et cetera, et cetera. Pay attention to the way he walks, the way he looks. Somebody's got to know this guy. Okay, so for a couple of years, they had the initial sketch out there, and I don't know how many people in the world have tried to decipher who is that sketch, that initial sketch, and comparative to, okay, and then, here comes the video. So again, we take the video and we try to take it apart piece by piece. What can we see from this? Is this person left-handed? He's obviously got a gun. He's obviously, has some ties. He's obviously got camera, field kit, whatever. So in building the profile, we say, okay, this guy's got a camera. He's visually oriented. He's wanting to take videos of these girls. He's organized. And we know that he's an organized serial killer because he came out there prepared to take control of 2 girls and kill that day. We know that he's probably left-handed. He may be ambidextrous that we're not aware of. We've got some pretty good images that I was able to pull, from the video in comparison to the sketch. Now, in talking about the sketch, the initial sketch, half of middle-aged America looks like that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, in discussing the sketch, we're going to have to set that sketch aside right now. They said don't do side-by-side comparisons and share them on social media. And obviously, we did side-by-side comparisons, but we didn't share. Anyway, and moving on, at this point, we're paying very close attention to Superintendent Doug Carter and what he says to the public and what other clues law enforcement gives to the public. What information has been put out there about these investigations. And so we know that there was a search warrant served at Ron Logan's house, and they went in and swept the area, swept his house. And then we know also Peru, Indiana. Okay, we know that homes up there were searched. Okay, so we have a question real quick from Similar Aspect. Is the new sketch supposed to be the model fake profile? Belinda and I believe that it is. Well, I believe that it is. I don't know. Belinda, I can't speak for you. I'm sorry. What do you believe?
No, that's okay.
What do you believe, Belinda?
I do have to believe that is a mirror image of the profile. I do.
Anthony Schatz.
I don't think that it was from an eyewitness.
Right. I think the initial sketch was from an eyewitness, but then you have the older sketch versus the younger sketch, and the younger sketch being, how should we say, a much better looking guy.
Right.
Doesn't look middle-aged. That said, yes, that's what we believe, that they took the second sketch from the fake profile. Now, we're going to get down there to the profiling of this guy, but let's continue on for just a minute as far as the investigation. Now, everybody's asking us how we arrived at our conclusions. So, for the past 5 years, Belinda and I have been working on what fits and what doesn't fit with this guy's profile. Okay? And again, every investigation is like a puzzle piece. Now, sadly, in specific areas around Evansdale and, around, I wouldn't say necessarily just Delphi, but a broader scope area, there are a lot of child predators. And so that's one of the reasons why initially I was like really hesitant to even get involved with the girls' specific cases, because, how many persons of interest are we talking about here? And again, as we explained before, in every investigation, you might have 10, 20 persons of interest, and in investigations, the law enforcement eliminates one right after another until they get down to a group where they can't eliminate them. And perhaps they may be able to include them in some way. And so there's that list. Now, Belinda, you've reiterated to me over and over that you really want to discuss how investigations are handled. Is there anything you would like to add to that? Are you still with me, Belinda?
Well, I think, yeah, dear. I'm sorry. There's probably a little pause.
Okay.
Probably a little pause every time I.
Yeah. Go ahead. Hello.
I'm sorry, dear. I'm sorry. My husband just decides to come walking in every time. No, I think you're on it, Tina. Keep going. I'm listening.
Okay, so
and we have discussed this
very often.
So much. I mean,
not just in our videos, but between the two of us. Okay, so you're looking at when you're looking at this investigation, you have this broad, enormous area, enormous crime scene. Okay. Not only that, you have the tip lines that were set up by the Indiana State Police and the FBI. And they received over 80,000 tips. And each one of those tips has to be vetted. And they have to go through those tips and see whether or not it's something useful or set it aside for later. They're not going to discard the tips, they might set them aside for later. Okay. So, in saying that, initially you had the FBI and ISP, Carroll County, do how many DNA tests? They said they came out and they said they had DNA. They're going to try to use familial DNA or anything. They're going to run, first of all, they're going to run all the predators in the immediate surrounding 5, 6, 7 counties. And they're going to try to locate him, which is one of the reasons why they came upon Daniel Nations, because he was non-reporting and he took off a couple of days after the girls were murdered. So not only do they have, let's talk about the workers and all the people that investigate, and stop me if I forget to mention anybody, but you have the hospital staff, you have, the coroner's office, anybody that investigated these girls. You have the labs, the police labs, all the people working behind the scenes, anthropologists, lab technicians. You have law enforcement that are running down leads. You have people that are deciphering phones, any kind of evidence at the crime scene. Okay, so, and then on top of that, add 80,000 tips. So when people say that law enforcement isn't handling this properly, with a case of over 80,000 tips, an enormous crime scene, 2 girls that were murdered, and I don't even know how many child molesters that they ran down, leads that they ran down on their social media accounts, looking through this, looking through that, trying to connect family, friends, people at school, anybody that may have known anything about these girls, all the investigation and the interviews conducted, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an enormous amount of information that law enforcement is dealing with. And it's separate people. Keep in mind that separate people, and we're, at this point, I would say hundreds, if not 1,000 people working on this, people answering calls at the call center, search and rescue, just, again, an enormous amount of people working on just these girls' homicides. And a lot of people, don't understand when children go missing. A lot of times, Secret Service, their resources are called in. Federal investigators, if an investigation crosses state lines and there's a possibility of a connection or signatures or anything with other homicides, it goes to federal in support of Carroll County and Indiana State. So initially Carroll County handles it, then it goes to the state police, and then if there's a possibility of it being a serial killer, serial predator, or the dark web is involved or anything like that, it's obviously going to go federal. Now, the federal investigation works in conjunction with the state police in case capital charges are forthcoming. Capital murder, kidnapping, et cetera, et cetera. Am I missing anything, Belinda? Hello, hello?
Hello. You just want me to talk, don't you?
Yes, I do. I want you were talking before and you had a whole lot to say, and yeah, I'm waiting for your input.
Well, I think for me, I want to just discuss for a minute. A lot of people right off the bat, they say, well, they have video. You have a picture. That's more than what normally you have in any investigation.
Yes.
And with the phone, with the voice, you don't hardly ever get that.
Right.
And so we've discussed multiple times, because the video is very pixelated.
Yes.
So was that done? Did law enforcement do that purposely? Not lying to the public, but basically, we know. We don't think that they're going to do it and put the full picture out there and somebody's going to go and vigilante this guy.
Right.
Because that would happen.
Right.
But not only that, do they have DNA? Is it touch DNA? What exactly do they have? Of course, we don't know.
Right,
But
because we don't have the
more
specific.
than what normal cases start out with.
Right. They do have a lot more, and so people tend to become frustrated. But you have to remember, again, all of these various aspects go into an investigation, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's not like a CIA thing or CIA. Forgive me for saying that. It's not like a CSI thing where you can watch a program and it's solved in an hour. Now, a lot of people watch the first 48 and they say that they believe that if you don't have a person of interest in the first 48 hours, that the case is unsolvable. That's not true. A lot of cases have been solved. Now, Gary Ridgway, for instance, they narrowed in on him and Ted Bundy, for that matter, years before they were actually captured. And that was due to lack of evidence and the ability to process evidence because they didn't have the same technologies that we have today. Similar aspect is asking the question, is that why the police said you never thought we would, but we have a new investigation strategy and the suspect could be in this room because he's hiding that fake profile? Or am I way off? What do you think about that? How should I answer that, Belinda?
No, I don't think they're way off at all.
I don't think they're way off. Yeah. Okay, so again, if you're looking at the investigation, you go back to the beginning and how a profile is built. And you say, okay, what do the demographics tell us initially? And what do we have at this crime scene? Now, the public doesn't have the crime scene. So police, they have FBI profilers, state profilers, all these people, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're working on this specific area and they're going to build a profile. And you have to look at the picture in totality, not just, take a puzzle piece here and a puzzle piece there. And so, again, they may have come to a consensus agreement that, okay, we need to put this out there because by that point, they had already built a strong case against particular individuals. Now, Belinda and I, we're going to discuss some things about why we reached our opinion that, Keegan Kline, in my opinion, is bridge guy. Belinda, would you agree?
I'm heading in that direction.
Yes, we think.
Not quite there yet.
She's not quite there. I'm pretty sure it's him as bridge guy. That said, that doesn't mean he was the only one out there.
Right. That's where I'm at.
Exactly. So, in our videos, we've talked about James Bryan Chadwell, Garrett Kurtz, discussed other persons of interest because of the location of the girls, because of where they were found, and what we saw is signatures and a possible, if not probable, connection to Evansdale. Okay, so let's start with Evansdale girls, Elizabeth Collins and Lyric Cook. Now, those girls were taken from a little lake that was about a block and a half away from their house. They were out riding their bikes. It was the middle of the day, and they were taken. Bikes were left. I believe Lyric's purse was left, and they were discovered. Their remains were discovered 6 months later at Seven Bridges Park in Bremer County. Now, the way the killer took them up to the park was not through the park, but actually they believed that they drove on the back of a farm, took them across the creek, and did what he did and left them in that area. Now, when you're talking about signatures, there was some odd wood stuff going on in that area. Now, if you look at the Delphi homicides, he comes across the creek, he's got the video camera. So did he have a video camera? If it's the same killer, or killers, did they videotape Elizabeth and Lyric? Now, we don't know. But the crime scene areas, the girls were taken, again, 2 girls were taken, down a hill across a creek, and he did what he did in that specific area with some specific wooden features. That's what Belinda and I have seen and noted just from public information. Now, in discussing serial killers, serial predators, they don't start out in almost all of them. They don't start out with necrophilia. They don't start out in snuff films. They don't start out, they may be into child pornography or, violent pornography or anything, something like that. But eventually it ends in a certain way. Now, when someone's got a video camera and he's going out there to commit these murders and he's collecting 2 girls in the middle of the day in a place that could be considered dangerous. And then if you look at the crime scene photos and you say, well, this wood was set up in a certain way. So, the police early on said he had to be familiar with the area. So then you have to ask yourself, well, who was involved? Who was involved specifically? So they bring out Daniel Nations that tells us it's a sex crime. They're checking out all these sexual predators. It's a sex crime. You see the video camera, then this is a voyeur, someone who's visually oriented. And then you look at the areas and you say, okay, what is he doing here? Is he possessing these girls? Why is he laying out this wood in specific patterns? And what does this have to do with the profile? Is there anything you'd like to add, Belinda?
Well, I'm just going to throw this out there, though, Tina. I don't think we've ever discussed it, but it just came to me, maybe we have, if it is Keegan Kline, maybe, is it just possible he could be a copycat?
It is.
The information is out there.
It is. And I was thinking about that earlier. Okay, so you have the palindrome, of the date of death of the girls in Evansdale and the date of death of Abby and Libby. So Elizabeth, Lyric, Abby, and Libby, and the dates mirror each other.
Right.
Now, a lot of these pedophiles who get into the dark web, and they'll share images on computers with each other in certain disgusting dark groups and pedophilia groups, necrophilia, certain paraphilias, and they'll share their images with each other. They may attach them to movies or, pictures or, profiles. And a lot of these guys, of course, they're going to use fake profiles. What else would they do? They're not going to, advertise as themselves on social media or anything. So, for law enforcement working on this, they have to separate all that out. Now, here's where it becomes a little interesting. And Belinda and I were discussing this earlier today. When you're looking at Keegan Kline, he was arrested in August 2020. So something not long after they put the second sketch out, and of course they were building cases against them. Okay, let's start from the beginning with Keegan Kline. Okay, so February 25th, 2017, which was 11 days after the murders of Abby and Libby, a week and a half later, they put a search warrant on his house. Okay, there's someone else that was arrested in March 2017, and that was James Brian Chadwell. Okay, so then you're wondering, why did it take so long for them to arrest Keegan Kline? Said he's got, 100 images, him talking to girls, collecting things over the years. He knew he was on the radar back then. Did he continue that behavior, or is that just what they ascertained from his devices? And let me just say this. in the redacted statement from police, they did allude to the fact that Keegan Klein, first he says, no, I didn't do it. No, I didn't contact those girls. And then he says, yes, I did. But then he also goes on to admit that he erased a whole bunch of stuff off of devices. Now, what about devices that police were unaware of? So you've got investigators in the background that are technology investigators, and they have to go and try to decipher these images. They also have to try to see, okay, is he Delphi? Does he fit the profile? Do we match him up to this case? And of course, they're investigating every single thing about this guy. So in looking at the dates, when did you bring up that he was arrested? And we believe that, as part of this investigation a long time ago, in being that in April 2021, when he went in and went after this girl, they went right and said, okay, we're going to search your house, and they found her. Thank God they did. But Belinda and I believe he was flagged, being that they came from the same state. You still with me, Belinda?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, so a long time ago, and we're talking years ago, we were saying, well, this guy's got a video camera, so if he's sharing this, who is he sharing with? Is he working alone? Is he not working alone? And again, that brings us back to the question of, does Chadwell and Klein run in the same predator circle? Do they share images with each other? Are they connected somehow? Now, interestingly enough, when Chadwell was arrested, we did a little background work on him and found out he's got family in Evansdale. And so, family in Evansdale, and then is there a possibility that, he was running with this kid? Because at that time, at the time of the Evansdale murders, Keegan Klein would have been a teenager. Or, like you said, is he a copycat? Is he following his mentor? And if so, who is his mentor in reference to Keegan Klein, if he's the Delphi killer?
Right.
Okay, so you look at all these things, and I know in the past I've talked about the Holly Bobo murder and said, okay, you've got, when Holly Bobo was abducted, she was taken by Zach and Dylan Adams, Sean Atkins, and eventually Jason Autry assisted in her murder. But they took this girl, and so in referencing that and looking at these sets of girls, is this a copycat using a palindrome? What is the significance of the palindrome, and what does the wood have to do, and are they connected, and so on and so forth? Now, Belinda and I have built our own little profile, so to speak, but it seems to us, there very well may be a connection there. And in looking at the dark web, we've talked about this the other day. Belinda and I talked about this to some extent, but in talking about the dark web again, these guys tend to run in circles. They share images with each other. They join specific chats where they know they're going to be able to, elevate their creep factor and, live out their fantasies online. Did they join together? And if so, who all is involved? Now, Belinda and I have said before, is it JBC? Is it KK? Is it Garrett Kurtz? What does this have to do with Ron Logan's property? And looking at the wood and the way it was set up, this person was obviously out there prior to. Is there anything you'd like to add that I'm forgetting to mention, Belinda?
No, other than, of course, you got to go by opportunity.
Yes.
Who had the opportunity to do this? Who had?
Right.
So was there a motive? Was there?
Well, motive would be.
Go ahead.
Motive would be sexual and control. We know that. because the police have come out and said, we know this is about power and control for you. And
Right.
what a lot of people don't understand is even if those girls were not raped or anything sexual in nature, what a lot of people don't understand is almost all of the cases for girls of this age are sexual in nature. And being that the person had a video camera on and was voyeuristic, visually oriented, then you have to look at, okay, why was he taping? And then you have to say, well, did he ejaculate prior to? A lot of serial killers will get excited and those things will happen prior to, and so there may or may not be semen. There may or may not be physical evidence of a sexual nature. What else? What else, Belinda? Okay, so back to the topic at hand, you have to ask yourself, okay, is this one primary serial killer, or is this person working in tandem with someone else, or more than one person, or is this a network? If it's a snuff film and if they obtained images from the dark web or video, what have you, has it been shared? Where is it gone? Who is connected? And all these things, law enforcement is investigating all of it. And that takes an enormous amount of effort and time, especially if Keegan Kline, the initial person who made contact with Libby, if in fact he did share. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, someone was asking us earlier about an informant. Okay, in August of 2020, did Keegan Kline inform on James Bryan Chadwell? That's a valid question. What are your thoughts, Belinda?
Well, I think there's got to be some kind of connection. There's got to be some way that they're connected. It has to be. I mean, just from other investigations that we've done, and you see this so often.
Right. And now
definitely believe there's a connection.
Yeah, and now John Kelly, he did a profile.
I mean, it's not a connection. Wait, let me
go ahead.
Let me say this.
Go ahead.
Not a connection. Maybe not as them doing this crime together, but there's a connection. They're pedos. I'm just going to say that.
They're both chomos.
Yes, they're out there. They're creeps, and so I'm sure that they live so close together that they're definitely into some awful stuff.
Well, and that's the thing, Chadwell did have a connection to Evansdale, Iowa.
Right.
And so did someone else, and I'm not going to mention any names.
Right.
But so did someone else that we've discussed. So did another person that we've discussed. And so when you're looking at the dark web, they call it a web because it is, frankly, a spider web. And so then you have investigators that come in and try to decipher what's going on in the spider web with these child molesters, these chomos. Now, James Bryan Chadwell, he pled guilty and freely admitted that he tried to kill a 9-year-old after while he was actively sexually assaulting her. So I'm not going to get into graphic details, only what the public knows, but he allowed his dog to attack this child. And that is depravity in the worst form. Okay, so then if you look at the Delphi killer, who we believe is a serial killer, he's coming across that bridge, prepared to kill. He's got cameras on. Is there a connection? Now, Donald Spain just asked, does Chadwell lived with his dad in Peru around the time of the murders also a coincidence? I don't think so. I don't think so. No. If you go back and you look at, prior videos that Belinda and I have done, it's kind of like connecting the dots. Who was the circle of people that were running here? Now, Mark Redwine, he had a route from Denver to Delphi. And when Anthony Greeno asked him about the homicides of Abby and Libby, he wrote him back something like the Delphi Bridge or something to that effect. So he instantly knew. Not only that, he was at Indiana Packers on that day. Are they trafficking children? Are they trafficking child porn? Are they connected? And there's a good possibility that they are. We said in our last video, Abby and Libby were heroes. If you look at, and we probably as the public will never know, all of the people that were arrested in connection because Libby had the ability and the wherewithal and the intelligence to take this brief video, they were able to make connections. And the police came out in their latest statement and said, look, there were many secondary investigations, dozens of secondary investigations because of this. And Belinda and I, we have no way of predicting how far this will actually go and how many people will actually be arrested because of it. Now, in getting down to just the homicides, the question remains, was it 1? Was it 2? Was it 3? Was it 4? Why were they out there on that specific property? Who set it up? Identifying the killer on the bridge. And so the public starts to get a bigger picture of, you've got 80,000 tips before. Now with the Anthony Schatz profile and Keegan Kline, you've got another 500 tips that they're deciphering. And it's all a matter of, picking through the spider web or the dark web and finding out who was actually there. Can we place them at the scene? Did they have means, motive, and opportunity? Okay, so that takes us again back to the beginning. You've got all of these different suspects and you have to try to eliminate them. And the reason the police try to eliminate them is so they can narrow the focus. Okay, now we've eliminated these people. How do we focus in on this? It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if there was a hub or a network of child pornography streaming through those areas that's being trafficked. So, in saying that, I think a lot of people need to stop and think before they start saying, well, these police and law enforcement allowed these child predators to go free. No. There's a vast difference between what you know and what you can prove. Chadwell just got 90 years. Is he involved? Keegan Kline is facing a whole plethora of charges, and he will be arraigned on the palindrome 22522. Is he involved? Absolutely. We know he is because he contacted Libby. He is a person of interest. Now, his lawyer, who happens to be Ron Logan's lawyer, came out and says, no, there's nothing going on here that I'm aware of. He may not be aware of it. He knows his client's charged with 30 counts of child pornography and so on and so forth. Procuring images from little girls. What were they doing with those images? So Keegan Kline admitted to contacting little girls and, getting images from them, getting them to send him photos and so forth. They found videos and other things. Now, the question remains, what did he erase and what does law enforcement have? Okay, so Belinda, is there anything you'd like to add? Am I missing anything that we wanted to discuss?
No, I don't think so. I would like to add, for me, I only think that There was probably one, maybe two involved in this. And what brings me to that conclusion is because they called school off. They didn't have, it wasn't planned. It was something that just, they decided, okay, let's do this at last minute and let's go out there. And so I don't think that there was, I don't think there was more than two.
Well, but I'm not certain if it was planned or not because
Right.
of
No,
right.
I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying in general.
Right. In general, it was a happenstance. Are they going to show up? Are they not going to show up? Did they contact them to meet them in advance? We don't know that.
Right.
We do know that,
Well, it could have
again,
been for another day. And then they
could have been. Could have been some, a lot of these predators, especially when they're visually oriented, he's got the camera, they're stalkers.
Mm-hmm.
And Keegan Kline may have known about Abby and Libby without them ever knowing about him.
Right.
James Brian Chadwell, if in fact they do run in the same circles, may have known about Abby and Libby before they ever knew about him. So the question becomes, why were they on Ron Logan's property and why was the crime scene? I don't have the actual crime scene, but what I noted in some of the photos, the way the wood was set up, some of it twisted into other wood, some of it laid across each other, and then there's kind of like certain barriers laid out in certain ways. That was done intentionally. And a lot of predators will try to claim ownership over their victims, or they may have a certain fantasy in mind. And so that becomes a question, was this about fantasy? Was this a psychological claiming of these victims? That I can't answer. I don't have the crime scene. I don't know. All I know is what I saw in the photos that were shared online, and so on and so forth. But I have to ask that question, was this set up in advance? And so in discussing that part of it, you look at Chadwell and you look at his tattoos. So he's got the tattoos on his arm and on his chest, and they strongly resemble Liberty German. And then on this side, they strongly resemble Elizabeth and Lyric. Now, this begs the other question. Did Chadwell do it and share those images, and then Keegan Kline got a hold of those images?
Right.
So again, was it 1? Was it 2? Was it 3? Why was it on that property? Who was there? Were they aware of it? At this point, law enforcement has come out and said to the public, look, we can't wait for the day to come and tell you everything we know. And not just secondary investigations, but other arrests. Did they share images? And if so, who all obtained those images? And if those persons obtained those images, were they involved in the actual crimes? In all of this spider web is what law enforcement has to decipher. Not to mention 80,000 tips and another 500 tips, and how many fake profiles do these people actually have, and what did they share, and so on and so forth.
I'm not going to compare these Abby and Libby to my daughter, but I am going to say, with my daughter's investigation, there was 17 people that got arrested.
Yes.
None for her disappearance, none for anything that happened to her, but 17 was arrested. And to this day, for 11 years now, almost every single one of them, at least once or twice a year, either they stayed in jail, they would get out and right back in.
Right.
And that's basically what we're talking about here, and that's what happens. Not for my daughter's murder, but because of.
And sadly,
with Abby and Libby.
And sadly, like with so many murders, with your daughter, this full well, that it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
What you can prove. Absolutely.
And can you prove it? And your daughter was out there for almost a month. Fortunately, not fortunate that with Elizabeth and Larry because they were out there for 5.5 months. But
Right.
with Abby and Libby, they were found before 24 hours. And because, again, because the girls were able to leave clues at the crime
Right.
scene, they were able to obtain a whole lot of information from those clues, and particularly the video, the Snapchat that Abby had posted, or Libby had posted. One of them had posted and shared a Snapchat, and a girl at school happened to save it. And so that showed that they had connection to other social media. And so it's a matter of not just completing the puzzle, but connecting all the dots. And in having all this enormous amount of information that the police have to decipher through, you have to remember that they also have to decipher what was erased. That means
Right.
going back to each individual company, finding out about these accounts, finding out what came from their stock, what came from their storage, pulling that up and picking through it. So again, it's an enormous amount of information. Now, Donald Spain says it seems to be a lot of pervs in one small town of Peru. Honey, it's not just Peru. Okay, it's Indianapolis. It's all, Waterloo, Iowa, all around, Evansdale, and a lot of areas around Delphi. And again, it's not the towns. The towns are not at fault. You can't run from this. Frankly, in today's world of technology, there's really not a safe place to live with children. You got to watch your kids like hawks. You can't just trust them with anybody. And you have to set up surveillance. And, that's something we never talked about. A lot of people come in with surveillance and they say, okay, I might have something here. So they have to go through all those tapes. And then you got tracking devices on phones, computers, taps, all kinds of things on vehicles, on telephone poles. What is this person doing? Where are they going? Who are they with? Who is their circle of friends? Who do they run with? And how can we, take down this dark web? And so, there's a lot of work that goes into these investigations. Now, the public is aware of some things, but we don't know, as the public, everything that law enforcement has. We don't have the crime scenes, and we don't know what kind of evidence they've obtained. And so getting back to that, Belinda and I, will say, oh, it's got to be this guy. Oh, it's got to be this guy. Well, I in particular, not necessarily Belinda. She's more conservative than I am. But this person fits, this person fits, this person fits, this person fits. But like every investigation, from an investigation standpoint, once you say this person is a person of interest and they fit, then you got to say, can we eliminate them? Now, they eliminated Daniel Nations. But in looking at him, we're able to say, okay, this is the type of person they're looking for. What do you think, Belinda?
I'm sorry, I was reading the comment, Tina. What was your I didn't hear you, hon.
Okay, similar.
I was reading the last comment about the police had a warrant and didn't search for the missing phone.
Which missing phone are you referring to?
It's the last one that he turned in.
And again, and that's another thing, people might destroy a phone or whatever. They can still go back through the phone companies and find out information about that phone, where the phone was at, triangulate locations and all these other things, might be able to pull images, because those go into a storage database.
Well, yeah, but the sad thing is that so many use throwaway phones.
Yeah, they use burner phones, and, and that's another thing, okay? Just because people use burner phones doesn't mean you can't track them. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, but yeah, you can track burner phones. So there's that aspect of it as well. So for the people that are watching, are there any questions? If there are any more questions that you'd like to ask us right now, Belinda and I would like to answer some questions. If you want to put them in the chat, go ahead. And we'll give you a few minutes. Hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays out there. A lot of tragedy going on all around the world. Kentucky, 10,000 people put out homeless all at once from the tornadoes, and other states as well. So anyway, is there anything you want to add about the Delphi investigation? Similar aspects says the police and news articles said he wasn't involved. Oh boy. Talking about Klein? I don't believe the police have ever came out other than Daniel Nations and said we're eliminating anyone. In fact, just a couple days ago, they came out and said we haven't eliminated anybody. So if you can, we're going to put this video up on YouTube. If similar aspect, if you can give us some information as to where you heard that they've eliminated Klein or Chadwell or whomever. We know they eliminated Daniel Nations. But anybody else, if you can put that information, share that with us. It said that was in 2017. You're talking about Klein? I don't recall them ever saying they had eliminated Keegan Klein in 2017. Here's the other thing that people don't realize. They may have, in fact, said that, but the police can lie to you. Law enforcement can lie to you. They don't have to tell you the truth about their investigations. They can say whatever they want. In fact, if they did say that, it wouldn't surprise me to try to get him to relax and continue his behavior so they could monitor every little thing he was doing.
Oh my goodness. The way they will turn two people against each other.
Oh, Donald Spain.
Make them turn on each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. They'll say what they got to say.
Donald Spain says. Donald Spain said the FBI stated that back in 2017 during search in a news article, and similar aspects said you have slow mode on. Can you turn it off? I don't know how to do that. I tried, honey. I'm so sorry. I don't know. I'm new at this whole thing. It says say something. TC slow mode is on. How do I fix that? If anybody can tell me that.
I'm looking.
Yeah, even if they did come out and say that, they could have been lying. They served a search warrant on his house, and again at Ron Logan's, because the girls were found on his property and at his house. So, there's also Garrett Kurtz, who, murdered Nicole Bowen. He frequented Ron Logan's house. So there's another murderer that was there. And Donald Spain says, exactly, Ellie lies and misdirects as needed. Obviously. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They can do that for an investigation. That's okay. He says, similar aspect. Yes, it's in a news article if you Google it. So if they come back out and says, oh, this person in Peru, Indiana is of no interest to us, that could have... obviously, they got his information. They had the taps. They knew what this guy was doing, hence all the charges that we see now. They called him in. Now, a lot of the information that they released to the public has been redacted, understandably, because, they got to hold the investigation close to their vest. But, yeah. I'm wondering if Chadwell and Keegan Klein aren't informants. At this point, trying to garner more information for the public and for the investigation, who turned on who? Valid question. Do they know each other? Did Keegan Klein hang around with Brian Chadwell? Who else did they hang around with? Did they travel back and forth to Evansdale? Is this palindrome of dates significant with the killer? Again, the crime scene. So, if you go back and look at our video history, it kind of outlines everything, and why we've come to the conclusions that we've come to about this particular killer. Hopefully they'll catch him soon. Again, I believe more charges are forthcoming. But that falls back to a difference between what you know and what you can prove, as always, and all persons discussed are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, James Bryan Chadwell freely admitted that he tried to kill this little girl. And, I find the moles on his face interesting, the kayak shoes, and, Garrett Kurtz, the voice, and, this other, persons that Belinda and I are not able to discuss publicly. I'm not going to go there. All right, folks. Similar aspects said there's another person in Peru with red hair, got the same kind of charges as Klein. He uploaded in Dropbox February 14, 2017. That's very interesting. Very interesting. And we also know there were a couple of other people that were arrested for child pornography. And so, again, it's a matter of, they call it the dark web, but I think Belinda described it perfectly when she said spider web. And how big is this spider web? How many states does it cover? Are there other victims involved? Is Flora connected? Yeah, Donald Spain says for $1 million. Now, I'm not going to discuss our other persons of interest because I can't. But, you have to take the picture in totality from POI, 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 POI. Bring them all in and then say who's connected, who's not. Do they have, means, motive, and opportunity? Well, obviously, if they're on the dark web, they have motive. But means and opportunity are very different. And that's for law enforcement. That's for the investigators on the case. What do you think, Belinda? You think we should wrap it up for tonight? Is there anything you'd like to add to this, Belinda?
Well, nothing other than, this crime, of course, was definitely a seasoned killer. I don't believe it was someone that's just starting out. We both said that over and over and over again.
No, this is a serial killer. And and
talking of the crime,
and speaking of the crime. Yes.
Talking about the heinous of the crime, talking about, the way he did it, broad daylight. 2 girls on top of it.
Yes.
It's just all of it. It's not somebody that just started out yesterday and decided, oh, I want to go and grab 2 girls. No.
Right.
Definitely not. He was prepared.
Well, he was prepared. He had, his weapons. He had the camera. This was someone who, again, this sexual in nature, probably. Was he making snuff films for his own fantasy or to share to the web? And now looking at the connections with Keegan Klein, I would say both. Was he trying to make money off of these? Was he trafficking these images, these videos? And if so, who did he traffic them with? Again, you have to ask yourself who was involved. And that could be more than one person. At the scene itself, it could be more than one person. Now, we also know at this point that the dumbass used the profile of an Alaskan cop, Officer Vince Kowalski. Innocent, totally innocent cop who was blown away that his modeling photos were actually used as a ruse for Keegan Klein to connect with these girls. So that's what I wanted to mention. Okay, so in 2019, you had John Kelly, and then what is his the psychologist's name, the profiling psychologist, please forgive me, I can't remember your name. I am so sorry. And then Frank Adamson, another, detective slash profiler who worked on Gary Ridgway's case. Anyway, in 2019, on John Kelly's page, it's John Kelly Profiler. I'll put a tag on the bottom when I post the video, but he did a profile for Delphi, and he said the main connection at this point, and all three of them were at a consensus view that there had to be some kind of connection between the visual aspect of it, the camera, and the killer. So you're looking at Snapchat, Instagram, any kind of social media accounts and connections in regard to that. And so in saying that, I think they did a fabulous job of putting the pieces together back then. Anyway, the connection we now know is Anthony Schatz, the fake profile of this, Vince Kowalski, officer from Alaska, innocent man. That his photos were stolen by Keegan Kline, and Keegan Kline actually made contact with Liberty German. Do I believe he's your bridge guy? Yes. I do. I believe Keegan Kline is the bridge guy. I believe that the second sketch was probably the sketch of Anthony Schatz. Does that mean that Chadwell, how was this whole thing set up? Did they kayak in and kayak out? Did they drive there? Again, we don't have the crime scene. Did one drive and the other, have his kayaks there? Was it a setup where one was on one side of the bridge, one was on the other side, where one was at, the crime scene, one's up here? We don't know. But there is, in looking at the areas where they lived, the areas where the crime scene was at, both of them being from Peru, Chadwell having a connection to Evansdale, and then you've got, even Redwine. I mean, how can you eliminate them? The police said, we haven't eliminated anybody, except for, they said they're no longer, they didn't say they eliminated Daniel Nations, they said they're no longer interested in him. So they moved him to the side. But other than that, Doug Carter said, you're going to be surprised when this is all over. And I wouldn't be surprised that this investigation goes far and wide in looking not only for who was involved, but where this information was shared. I think on that note, Belinda, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to get this together, and I'm going to post it on our site. True Crime Sages, if you haven't, hit the like and the share button. I want to be able to get Belinda on here live with me instead of bringing her on by phone. And that unfortunately takes 1,000 subscribers. Belinda and I, we're not about subscribers or making money or any of that crap. This is about the homicides and finding the killers. Or killer or killers. This is about the families. Yes, these girls, when all this is over, Belinda and I would like to do a video of just about the girls. We get tired of talking about these predators because, frankly, we talk about killers all the time. This is about the victims. And it sickens me that, we spend so much time talking about the killers when actually I want to know about the kids. These two girls, these 4 girls or 8 girls or however many children were actually involved, their lives mattered. So let's make some videos about their lives. Anyway, we're going to end this for tonight, and hopefully we'll talk to you all soon. Going to try to do more live streams in the future. Thank you for everybody for coming and joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.